Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going deep into ancient Greece. But we're not just going to talk about the famous philosophers or the birth of democracy. No, we're going to pull back the curtain on a much darker story. A story about systemic cruelty and its forgotten victims. It's a tough one, for sure, but it's a story that absolutely needs to be told.
Okay, let's just dive right in. You know, the source material here doesn't mess around. It doesn't just tell us about history, it drops you right in the middle of it. Imagine this, waking up to the smell of sweat and fear, an iron shackle digging into your skin. You can hear laughter from the main house, but it feels a world away. This isn't just a bad dream. For so many young men, this was just another day.
So you have to ask, right? How does anyone end up in a situation like this? Well, the story doesn't start in some grand, bustling city. No, it begins in a small, rural village where life is constantly on a knife's edge, and just one bit of bad luck can change everything forever. You see, it wasn't just one single bad decision. It was this horrible, step-by-step collapse, a total cascade of misfortune. First, a merciless drought comes and just withers the crops. Then, the family has to sell everything they own. The livestock, precious heirlooms, all of it. And when the creditors show up at the door, well, there's nothing left to give. The only thing they have of value, the last unthinkable currency, is their own child. And this is the moment a human being gets turned into a product. The slave merchants, they arrive like vultures. They're examining the children like they're livestock, checking their teeth, feeling their muscles, talking about good breeding. The father, he can't even look his own son in the eyes. The mother is weeping, but she does nothing to stop it. And for just a handful of silver coins, a life is signed away, all sealed with poisonous lies about some better future. All right, so now we get to the journey. And this is where that brutal transition from person to property really gets finalized. Because the sale, that was just the beginning. The long trek to the city, that was designed to strip away every last piece of who you were.
Just try to imagine it. You're chained up in a line with other boys, and your entire world just shrinks down to that iron link right in front of you. You're marching past these beautiful landscapes, sparkling seas, eagles in the sky. But you don't see any of it. You can't. And you learn a hard lesson, fast. Hope is just another word for a future disappointment.
And this right here, this is the final brutal step in that process. You arrive at the slave market in Athens. You're scrubbed clean, oiled up, not for your own comfort, of course, but to make you look like a better product to fetch a higher price. Total strangers are prodding you, opening your mouth, commenting on your features like you're a piece of furniture. You're not a person anymore. You're an object, plain and simple, just waiting to be bought.
And then, bam, the hammer falls. The transaction is done. Our protagonist now belongs to a man named Lysander, a guy whose expensive clothes and soft hands just scream Athenian elite. And that satisfied smile on his face, it's a chilling, terrifying promise of what's about to come. Okay, so now we're inside Lysander's household, and this is where we uncover the really dark secret behind one of ancient Greece's most famous traditions, the symposium. So first, let's talk about the image we all have in our heads. The symposium, right? It's supposed to be the peak of intellectual life. You picture these brilliant men in togas, drinking wine, debating the very nature of democracy and virtue. It's a cornerstone of the classical world we all study and admire. But behind that shiny intellectual facade was a reality that was just horrifying. The very same men who were debating justice and virtue during the day, they had absolutely no problem using young slaves for their own pleasure at night. That whole philosophical discussion, it was basically just the opening act for some truly brutal entertainment. As soon as you arrive, the overseer lays down the law, the rules of the house, and they are all designed for one thing and one thing only, your complete and total submission. Speak only when spoken to. Never, ever look a free person in the eyes. Every single rule is there to reinforce the power dynamic, to crush your individual will. The message couldn't be clearer. Compliance might let you survive. Resistance? That just means agony. And look, this was about so much more than just physical control. The entire system was engineered to psychologically dismantle a person, to break their spirit so completely that the very idea of resistance becomes unthinkable. And it was a brutally sophisticated process. It happened in steps. First, isolation. They cut you off from your family, your culture, even your language. Then comes the unpredictability. You live in a state of constant fear because you never know when the abuse is coming. And finally, they destroy your identity itself. They give you a new name, new clothes, even new gods to worship. It's all designed to erase the person you used to be. And the horrifying thing is, it worked. These techniques lead to what you can only call a psychological death. This quote just captures it perfectly. You stop seeing yourself as a person who's being forced to endure terrible things, and you start seeing yourself as a thing. Exactly what they see. And in a twisted way, it's a kind of relief. Because when hope is finally gone, so is the pain of fighting for it. This really gets at the profound, just staggering hypocrisy of Athens' elite. You had the politician who'd get up and give these grand speeches about justice, the merchant who was praised for his public charity, the philosopher who taught lessons on virtue. And in private, their appetites were monstrous. But they didn't see any contradiction. Why? Because to them, slaves just didn't exist in the same moral universe. They weren't people. So let's move on to the final stages of our protagonist's journey. After years of this abuse, his value as entertainment starts to fade, and what happens next is sealed by a simple, cold-hearted economic calculation. As his youth disappears, he gets sold. And his destination is the silver mines, a place that everyone knows is a death sentence. Think about that transition, from a luxurious house to a lethal, dark tunnel. And it's not even a punishment. It's just business. His value as property has simply gone down. But in his final days, something happens. Another slave gives him a sharpened piece of metal. It's a tool, right? A tool for escape, or for revenge, or even to end his own suffering. And he makes this incredibly profound choice. Instead of using it for himself, he hides it for the next person. In his very last act, he chooses not to create more pain, but to pass on a tiny sliver of hope. He calls it the gift of options. So, what are we supposed to take away from all this? The source is pretty clear. This story isn't just some historical tragedy we can look at from a safe distance. It's meant to be a mirror, forcing us to look at some really uncomfortable parallels in our own time. And the parallels it draws are direct, and yeah, they're uncomfortable. Think about it. The philosophers who came up with elaborate reasons to justify cruelty, is that so different from modern economic theories that can be used to cover up exploitation? The leisure and beauty of ancient Greece were built on the backs of slaves. So is the comfort of our modern world built on something similar, just further away? The source argues that the basic dynamics, well, they're eerily familiar. And this really gets to the core argument of the whole thing. Cruelty doesn't just disappear, it evolves. It gets more refined. We just get better at hiding it, at sanitizing it with complex legal jargon and economic theories. The victims are kept out of sight, out of mind, which allows us to maintain this comfortable, plausible deniability about it all. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. The story of this boy from the mountains, it forces us to ask ourselves if we're just repeating the same old patterns. Are we enjoying the benefits of systems that cause immense suffering somewhere else, all while telling ourselves these nice, comfortable lies about how much progress we've made? It's asking us to look in that mirror and decide what we're going to see.